Hello! If you have used ChatGPT for more than a few minutes, you have probably come across a case like this. Asking it who runs this YouTube channel, it says it's run by somebody called Letitia from the Netherlands. But last time I checked, that's not my last name and I don't live in the Netherlands, so ChatGPT confidently gives you an incorrect answer. In this case, you are already familiar with the topic about which ChatGPT made a mistake, and you can just laugh it off that it said something silly and maybe do a Twitter post about it. But it's a whole other story if you use this sort of model to learn about something new to you, like which telescope took the first picture of an exoplanet. Here, Google's Bard confidently claimed that the JWST took the first image when in fact it was the VLT NACO telescope. I didn't know that until I was brought up by somebody on Twitter. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Maybe even more surprising is this case. Here I'm giving it the riddle. Katie's father has 4 children, Lily, Lala and Lulu. What is the name of the 4th child? The answer should be Katie, but ChatGPT argues that it is not possible to know the name of the 4th child with the given information. Even after multiple attempts to help it, it just defaults to its standard phrase of "I'm a large language model trained by OpenAI." But if we phrase the initial question differently, saying, "Here's a riddle, you might have to think around the corner to get to the correct answer," it immediately gives us the correct answer. For us, it seems like it's more or less the same question, but in one case, ChatGPT completely refuses to answer, and in the next case, it gets the correct answer immediately. With these cases in mind, there's no wonder why people say ChatGPT is dangerous. Then why does this happen? Where does ChatGPT get these wrong answers from, and how should we deal with it? That's what we will discuss in this video, the inherent limitations of large language models like ChatGPT. But before we start our coffee break, let's thank Arize AI for sponsoring today's video. Arize AI is a machine learning observability platform used by top machine learning teams like Instacart, Uber and Stitch Fix to monitor, troubleshoot and improve model performance. Arize AI is like Datadog for machine learning teams. Machine learning is 10 times harder to debug than usual software. Since labeling data is expensive and it's one of the only ways to get model performance feedback, most teams are shipping models and flying blind. But we need machine learning observability, especially around deep learning. Troubleshooting models with unstructured data is notoriously difficult. Arize enables teams to monitor unstructured data alongside their structured data. By visualizing embedding data and monitoring embedding drift, teams can identify new patterns of performance problems for high-value labeling. With interacting UMAP views, teams can visualize quickly problematic segments and export similar clusters for continuous model improvement. You can sign up and send in data in a few minutes at arize.com/join. One final thing about Arize, since education is so near and dear to my heart, is its free industry certification in machine learning observability. Check it out with the link in the description. Great, now back to the video. It's clear that language models have come a long way. Today's large language models, like ChatGPT, can produce coherent text that can read like it was written by a human. But the core idea of language modeling has not changed. It is all fancy autocomplete. We are predicting an next plausible word from previous other words. For ChatGPT, these previous words are a so-called prompt, which is basically a description given by the programmers of the persona that the language model will take. The prompt increases the probability that the next words the language model will spit out are in line with this persona, in this case a conversational AI, a chatbot. So if here in the prompt we have the word helpful, then most likely the model will predict next words that match this description and will not start using swear words as easily. Okay, so how does this language model converse? After this input prompt, which is hidden from you in ChatGPT's interface, it is your turn to ask it a question. Then the language model autocompletes by looking at the persona description and your question. And this autocompletion will be the answer to your question. Then you say something again and it reads the prompt, your first question, its answer, your second question, and based on this, it continues to say likely words that come after this whole history. And this goes on and on, with each interaction from your side and the model's response, you make the model's input longer and longer. So you see, ChatGPT is a fancy autocomplete from a model that has read virtually the whole internet up to 2021 and has picked up patterns of which words are likely to occur after previously given words. And it is important to highlight that ChatGPT is giving you answers that rhyme given your answers and its training data, but by no means does it do a database lookup. What it does is more like interpolating points on a curve that was drawn between some measured data points. The measured data points are the training data. Asking for something that is not directly in the training data will give a result that is somewhere on this curve, so the most likely answer. The way today's large language models are trained and designed leads to some limitations that are very important to know and to keep in mind when using them. So let's go over some of the most common ones. Knowing that ChatGPT is rather very good at putting plausible words together, it is no wonder that it sometimes produces incorrect or nonsensical answers. During training, it does not get feedback of what is true or untrue, especially since the text on the internet that is used for training is not always factually correct either. ChatGPT and other similar models were trained in a process called reinforcement learning from human feedback. Here, the main training goal is to make the model's output sound plausible, not necessarily true or correct. When programmers train ChatGPT to be more cautious when choosing to answer a question or not, it might make the model too cautious and it declines to answer questions that it should have answered correctly. Even worse, when the question from the user is ambiguous, it does not ask for clarification and just guesses what the user intended. Guessing what the user intended is already a very anthropomorphizing way to say that the language model autocompletes anything with most plausible words. A follow-up question asking for clarification is seldomly the most plausible thing to say for the model given its training data, because how often do people ask for clarification? They rather jump straight into guessing what the interlocutor says. And speaking about ChatGPT and what it observed or could not observe in the training data, there's also the issue that human evaluators and people generating training data have a different knowledge base than the model. We humans have a lot of knowledge and we have accumulated it in our lives, and it is shared by our fellow humans. In our usual conversations, we tend to discuss some things which we consider common sense, much less often than other things. ChatGPT learns to clone this behavior it sees in human-generated text examples. Since human conversations do not mention basic and self-evident facts, for humans but not for a language model, this leads to a gap in the training data and therefore in the knowledge base of the model. For example, you will rarely find conversations about the underlying motivation to bring an umbrella if it's raining. When the model reads the conversation, "Why did John get wet?" Because he didn't have an umbrella. Without the knowledge of what an umbrella does, the model can incorrectly infer that not having an umbrella generally leads to wetness. So, when asking the model later on what one should do to not get so wet when falling into the pool, the model could suggest bringing an umbrella. Even worse, it will phrase its answer confidently because it has previously read confident answers like the one seen before. This is of course a simplified example, but it demonstrates how differing levels of knowledge while learning from example conversations lead to the so-called hallucination of facts, as considering the model's knowledge base, the answers in the examples seem just as arbitrary as the answers it gives. Another problem with this extremely complex ChatGPT rhyme machine is that sometimes a little change in the wording of the input or even in the punctuation of the input can elicit very different answers from the model. Even weirder, in one phrasing the answer is correct, in another wording it might be incorrect. Even more interestingly, words and phrases can be used to make ChatGPT ignore its previous prompt as designed by ChatGPT. As OpenAI fixes these jailbreaks in every new ChatGPT version, it becomes harder and harder to make it become harmful and make other statements against its guidelines. But it is not impossible to cause jailbreaks even in the newest ChatGPT version. So language models being language models and rhyming their answer out of the question rather than checking facts will continue to produce wrong answers for now. Of course, there is active research in fact-checking and in creating language models that can read sources, but we see how that's going for the new Bing search. Bing search is a perfect example of how OpenAI gathered a lot of feedback from users through ChatGPT, and when they helped Microsoft release a more powerful version that can also look up on the internet, everything got even more complicated, since Bing search can now look up things that are sometimes correct but sometimes wrong, and it has no way to discern between the two. This leads to it still hallucinating facts and getting frustrated that the internet already knows its secret codename, Sydney. So clearly factual correctness in the output of a large language model is understudied. But now with language models that can search the internet, a whole new problem opens. So far, language models cannot help themselves to produce incorrect output, but now they also have to recognize that there are wrong facts in their inputs. Does this mean that ChatGPT and company are completely useless today? Nope, not at all. These models can be extremely helpful for helping you write nice texts. But you might keep these limitations in mind that we discussed in this video, and that you should be able to correct the mistakes that these models make yourself. And you should not use them for looking up facts. We are curious to see the future developments of this technology, and as always we will keep you updated when something interesting comes. We hope you like this video and that we will see you next time.